Observe any room you walk into. The person fighting desperately to be heard, raising their voice, rushing to fill the dead air. They are rarely the one in control. They are leaking energy. They are broadcasting their entire strategy without realizing it. Niccolò Machiavelli understood a fundamental law of human nature that modern power dynamics still obey to this day. Information is the currency of sovereignty, and the one who speaks first always pays the highest price. You have felt this. You have walked away from conversations, replaying every word you over-explained, every justification you offered without being asked, every detail you handed over to people who gave you nothing in return. You have watched less competent operators command entire rooms simply by saying less. And somewhere beneath the frustration, you have begun to suspect a forbidden truth. Your hesitation was never weakness. It was an untrained instinct for one of the oldest power moves in human history. Today, you decode the psychology of strategic silence, the principle of information asymmetry, and why the most formidable mind in any room is always the one who allows the silence to stretch. Read that line again. Machiavelli is not warning you about deception in the abstract. He is exposing the architecture of every social environment you have ever walked into. Most people are running on present necessity, the immediate anxious need to be liked, to be heard, to resolve the tension of silence. They will fill any vacuum placed in front of them. And here is the part the system never taught you. Every word someone speaks under that pressure is information. Information about their fears, information about their leverage, information about exactly what they want from you. You were trained to be the one who eases the tension, the one who reassures, the one who explains. You were trained to be the simple man Machiavelli described. And the rooms you walk into are filled with people who have unconsciously learned to extract value from that training. Look honestly at your own pattern. You are in a meeting, and there is a pause. Your nervous system spikes. You feel it. You are in a negotiation, and they go quiet. You sweeten the offer before they say a word. You are in a difficult conversation, and someone stares at you blankly. You explain yourself a second time, then a third, then offer a justification no one requested. This is not communication. This is a slow, steady transfer of power dynamics out of your hands and into theirs. The modern world has conditioned you to associate silence with awkwardness, when in reality silence is the single most concentrated display of inner sovereignty available to a human being. Machiavellian strategy did not invent this. It simply named what elite operators across centuries have always known. The composed observer extracts. The anxious communicator leaks. By the end of this, you will understand precisely which one you have been and exactly how to invert the dynamic permanently. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a sovereign in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Begin with a brutal diagnostic. The anxious communicator is not loud because they are confident. They are loud because they are afraid. Afraid of being misread, afraid of being dismissed, afraid of the cold, neutral space that opens up when no one is performing reassurance. So they speak, they clarify, they soften, they explain the explanation, and every additional sentence is a coordinate on a map of their inner world that anyone with basic emotional intelligence can read in real time. Carl Jung observed that what we suppress in ourselves does not disappear. It leaks. Your over-explaining is the leak. Your rushing to fill dead air is the leak. Your habit of justifying your decisions to people who have no authority over you is the leak. You were taught this was politeness. From a strategic standpoint, it is something else entirely. It is the constant, involuntary broadcast of your internal state to an audience that has not earned access to it. In power dynamics, This is called signal overflow, and it is the single fastest way to be categorized as someone whose boundaries can be tested, whose price can be negotiated, whose presence does not need to be respected. Consider the cost. Every time you filled a silence that did not belong to you, you handed someone else the frame of the conversation. Every time you reacted before you observed, you forfeited the higher ground. Every time you explained yourself to someone who was studying you, you fed them the exact information they needed to maneuver around you. This is the hidden tax of being the one who always speaks first. And no one ever sent you the bill because the entire arrangement depends on you not noticing. But you are noticing now, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The leaking communicator is not a personality. It is a trained response, which means it can be untrained. Here is the mechanism the composed observer understands and the anxious communicator does not. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is the heaviest, most oppressive form of presence you can deploy. When you withhold your reaction, you do not create emptiness. You create a vacuum, and human psychology cannot tolerate a vacuum. It must be filled by them, with their words, their reasoning, their nervousness, their concessions. This is the principle of information asymmetry, and it is the foundation of every serious negotiation, every courtroom cross-examination, every executive boardroom standoff that has ever ended in someone's favor. The party with more information about the other party's position holds the leverage. Strategic silence is not passivity. It is the deliberate engineering of that asymmetry in real time. You stop offering data. They keep producing it. Within minutes, you know more about their fears, their flexibility, and their fallback position than they know about yours. The math is simple, and the math is merciless. Consider what happens inside another person when you decline to react. Their first assumption is that they were unclear, so they restate themselves. And in the restating, they reveal what they actually meant the first time. Their second assumption is that you disapprove, so they begin negotiating against themselves, offering concessions you never requested. Their third assumption, the one that arrives in deeper silence, is that you know something they don't. And at that moment, the entire power dynamic has inverted. They are now performing for your approval. You have not said a word. This is not manipulation. This is the natural physics of human behavior under conditions of uncertainty. Machiavelli did not invent it. He simply documented it with a clarity that polite society has spent 500 years trying to bury. The composed observer applies this physics deliberately. The leaking communicator violates it constantly. Now layer in the Jungian dimension, because this is where strategic silence becomes something close to psychological X-ray. When you remain composed and unreadable, the other person does not see you. They see a blank surface, and onto that blank surface they project the contents of their own, unintegrated shadow. Watch what they project, because it is a confession. The person who accuses you of being cold in your silence is revealing their fear of being unwanted. The person who becomes irritated by your restraint is revealing their dependence on external validation. The person who suddenly begins flattering you in the quiet is revealing that they need something from you they have not yet named. The person who becomes aggressive when you do not react is revealing that their entire strategy depended on provoking a reaction. Their response to your silence is not about you. It is a map of their inner architecture, drawn by their own hand and delivered to you for free. This is what the suppressed observer archetype inside you was always designed to do. It does not argue, it does not defend, it watches, it catalogues, it waits. Carl Jung theorized that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. The anxious communicator's fate is to be repeatedly read by people who have integrated this observer when they have not. Your transformation begins the moment you reclaim that internal function, when you stop being the one who is read and become the one who reads. And here is the cold elegance of it. You do not need to interrogate anyone. You do not need to push, probe, or pressure. You simply need to stop interrupting their self-disclosure with your own. Silence is the most efficient diagnostic instrument ever developed for understanding human behavior. And you have been carrying it inside you your entire life without knowing how to use it. But understand this clearly. Simply staying quiet will not project power. If your silence is anxious, defensive, or sulking, it leaks just as much as your words did. The vacuum only works when your internal state matches the external posture. This is the specific internal shift that separates the composed observer from someone who is merely intimidated and pretending not to be. The shift is this: you must move from waiting to speak to waiting to understand. The anxious communicator's silence is loaded. They are rehearsing their next line while the other person talks, which is why their pauses feel tense and unstable. The sovereign's silence is empty, genuinely empty, because they are not preparing a response. They are gathering information. There is no performance running underneath the stillness, and other people can feel the difference instantly, even if they cannot articulate what they are feeling. This is the sovereign archetype that Jungian psychology identifies as the integrated center of mature power. The sovereign does not need to win the exchange. The sovereign does not need to be agreed with. The sovereign does not need the conversation to end on their preferred note. This non-need is the source of the gravity. People who do not need anything from a conversation cannot be controlled by it. And people who cannot be controlled become, by default, the ones doing the controlling. Practice the internal posture before you practice the external one. When someone speaks to you, do not lean forward mentally. Lean back. Let their words arrive. Let them complete. Let the natural pause exist. Count to 3 internally before you respond, and use those 3 seconds not to construct a reply, but to observe what they just revealed. This is strategic silence as a discipline of mind, not a trick of behavior. The behavior is just the surface. The mind underneath is the actual machine. Now the application. You will deploy this in the environments where you have been bleeding leverage for years: competitive workplaces, negotiations, family dynamics where you have been cast as the explainer, social situations where you have been positioned as the one who smooths things over. The protocol has 4 moves, and you can begin tomorrow. First, decouple silence from rudeness. Your conditioning will tell you that not responding immediately is impolite. This is the conditioning that has cost you. A composed pause communicates that you take the matter seriously enough to think before you speak. People who matter respect this. People who exploited your speed will resent it. And their resentment is the clearest possible confirmation that you have stopped feeding them. Second, replace explanation with acknowledgement. When questioned, you do not need to justify. A simple, "I understand your position," or "that is one way to see it," closes the loop without surrendering any information about your own. The leaking communicator answers questions that were not asked. The composed observer answers only what is necessary and never volunteers what is not. Third, let them complete, fully, including the part after the natural ending where they begin to add, qualify, soften, or extend. That post-ending material is where the real information lives. It is what they say after they thought they were done. It is the unguarded sentence. Wait for it. It will come. And when it does, you will learn more about their actual position than the first 10 minutes of conversation gave you. Fourth, when you finally speak, speak once. One sentence, one conclusion. No elaboration unless requested. The anxious communicator says the same thing 5 different ways, hoping one of them lands. The sovereign says it once with weight and lets the sentence carry its own gravity. When you apply this final rule, the moment you finally do speak, the room will intuitively orient toward your conclusion. Not because you were loud, but because you were the only one who did not waste a single syllable. Expect internal resistance. Your nervous system will scream that you are being cold, that you are alienating people, that you are failing some invisible test of social warmth. This is the conditioning fighting for its life. Let it scream. Within weeks, you will notice a shift in how people approach you. They will be more careful, more measured, more respectful. Not because you demanded it, but because the energetic transaction has changed. You stopped paying, so the rates adjusted. There is a longer horizon here, and you should see it clearly before we close. The point of strategic silence is not to become someone who never speaks. The point is to become someone whose speech is no longer compulsive. There is a profound difference between a person who is quiet because they have nothing to say and a person who is quiet because they have nothing to prove. The first is invisible. The second is unforgettable. When you live from this place, your relationships sort themselves. The people who valued you only for your output of reassurance will drift away. They were not attached to you, they were attached to the leak. The people who remain will be those who can tolerate your full presence, including the parts that do not perform for them. This is a smaller circle. It is also a real one, possibly for the first time in your life. Your professional posture changes. You become the person whose opinion is asked for rather than offered. The person whose endorsement carries weight precisely because it is not given freely. The person who, in a room full of competing voices, becomes the gravitational center simply by not competing. This is the quiet, terrifying authority you have observed in certain executives, certain judges, certain operators who seem to control rooms they barely spoke in. You now know what they were doing, and you now know that the foundation of it was never charisma or status. It was a disciplined refusal to leak. Your inner sovereignty stabilizes. The constant low-grade anxiety of monitoring how you are being perceived begins to dissolve, because you are no longer performing perception for anyone. Self-mastery, in the end, is not the control of others. It is the cessation of needing to be controlled by what others might think. Machiavelli observed the mechanics. Jung mapped the interior. Your job is to live at the intersection of the two, analytical on the outside, integrated on the inside, and unreadable to anyone who has not earned the right to see in. So here is your beginning. The next conversation you walk into, you will not perform. You will not rush. You will not fill. You will let the silence stretch exactly as long as it needs to, and you will watch what the other person does inside it. That single act, repeated, will rewrite your standing in every environment you operate in. Not in months, in days. Because the people around you have been calibrated to your old frequency for a long time, and the moment you change it, the entire system around you will be forced to recalibrate. You have spent years giving away information you should have been keeping. You have spent years explaining yourself to people who were studying you. You have spent years mistaking your restraint for a flaw when it was all along the raw material of a power you were never told you had. That ends now. The observer in you is no longer suppressed. The sovereign in you is no longer dormant. The fortress is no longer unmanned. If you are ready to claim this, drop the word sovereign in the comments. Let it stand as a private contract between you and yourself, that the leaking ends here and the observing begins. And subscribe, because this is the only place where the psychology of inner sovereignty, Machiavellian strategy, and the integration of the shadow are taught not as theory, but as the operating system of a life you are no longer willing to lose control of. Everything we explore here is built for the mind that has been underestimated for too long and is finally ready to stop apologizing for its own depth. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.